Have you and Greg ever spoken? Is this the first time?
Have we, Greg?
Lee, one time I spoke to you, it was probably around 2021, actually, when we started the original podcast. I think Paul Sorensen, we had talked about you and he gave me your number and I reached out to you, but it was a brief conversation, but I don't recall what we talked about, to be honest with you.
I was that impactful.
Well, maybe it was me, it wasn't so bad.
Stop fishing, Lee. It's not attractive.
I
You're like the
love,
you're like one of the most impactful guys that's ever come out.
listen, Paul Sorensen's a great guy. He was so much fun to represent. And that was a long time ago. And instead of coming back here, he stayed up in the Northwest.
Yeah, I'm from Spokane, where he was at, and then most of my in-laws, I played ball at Wazoo 1 year in basketball, but they're all Cougars. And so I'm over in Seattle now. But yeah, so Paul, he helped out with my high school back in the day on the football program, and met him there at the Spokane club, and we just always had this relationship, and I kept running into him, and when I'd go into town, we'd meet for coffee. And so that's how kind of that derived.
Good.
Well, hey, it's great to have you on the 3P Champions podcast. Passion, purpose, and principle. Obviously, you exemplify that in your life. So thank you.
Yeah, Lee, where's your passion today?
Um, it's in several directions. One is trying to train the next generation of sports professionals with ethics and values and specific skills so they understand how to negotiate and recruit and brand and market, and so we pay it forward and populate the next generation. Then I have the Concussion Foundation to try to bring prevention, awareness, and cure to athletic concussion. And then I've got this book out, which I can see behind Greg. And so basically in life, people experience reverses. It could be financial, it could be health, it could be marital or relationships, or in my case, it could be alcohol. And life invariably may frustrate your dreams and may stand in the way of fulfillment. So the question is not whether that will happen, but if it does, at whatever degree, can you come back? Can you be resilient? Can you see the light at the end of the tunnel? So if I can help one person who's out there still struggling and despondent and confused find their way back to a happier life, then that book has done its job.
So we're kind of jumping ahead. We haven't even spoken about the beyond illustrious career you had as a sports agent. We're jumping right into sort of the aftermath of that. So when you ran into these issues and your life turned around, how did you come to that sort of stoic mindset?
So Rob, the key was to break denial, because alcohol was a disease that tells you you don't have a disease. And when everyone around you is pointing out how you're failing, you can be defensive, and I don't have a problem. So the first key is to break denial. And I was sitting on my deceased father's bed in our family home, having given up my practice and my condo, and my only cogent thought at that time was, where could I find more vodka? So I had an epiphany at one point, and I realized, my dad had raised me with two core values. One was treasure relationships, especially family, and the other was try to make a positive difference in the world, heal pain, and help people who can't help themselves. And I was failing on both counts. So I realized I wasn't a starving peasant in Somalia. I didn't have the last name Steinberg in Nazi Germany in the 30s. I wasn't sick in any fundamental way other than alcohol. What excuse did I have not to try again? And once I broke denial, then it was just full focus for a 12-step program with a unique fellowship and working those steps and finding a routine that for a life without alcohol.
Lee, how long did that take, that process from the point that, let's say we call it rock bottom, to where you decided in your mind, I got to change from that point on?
Right. So I left my parents' house and went into sober living. And I lived in a place without alcohol with a lot of good, supportive people. And we don't do this alone. I mean, I've had the help of so many different kind and supportive people. But started working the steps there, and by the time I was out, I had a routine and I had 6 months under my belt. And then it was just a question of when was it reasonable to re-enter the world and to go back to the profession I had done for, well, now it's been 52 years.
Well, I got to think that, I deal with my kid who's going through struggles with just, mentally trying to re-enter the sports field because he's stressed about it. But with someone like you who has so much success in your background, and people probably have perception of you this superhuman being, and you're going through this process, and that first step back into the limelight, that must have been difficult.
Well, first of all, I waited for 3 years. So by the time I found funding for a new agency, I had been sober for 3 years. But I had to be prepared. I didn't have a divine right to represent athletes. They have needs and they reach out. And I had to be prepared for parents and questions from people. How can you guarantee you'd stay sober? How can you didn't do a great job with your finances. What about ours? Well, we don't do financial planning. It's done by professionals. But you had to be ready for and not defensive about any questions that could be thrown to you. And fortunately, eventually we built a practice, and signing Paxton Lynch back in 2016, who was a first-round quarterback picked by Denver, sort of sent a signal that I had weekends where I represented half the starting quarterbacks in football. So that was the first path back, and then the next year came Patrick Mahomes and a group of other athletes, and then Tua Tagovailoa, and pretty soon we had a practice that had probably the most dominant player in the NFL in Patrick Mahomes.
No doubt. So, of all the things you've done, and you've obviously achieved greatness as an agent. I can't tell you how much respect I have for the way you've approached and sort of attacked your situation and coming back from a debilitating alcoholic, attack. And just as a side note, my brother and I are working on a caregiving initiative called Share Giving, and it's really for the benefit of the caregiver, particularly family member caregivers caring for a loved one with dementia, which is a very difficult job, obviously, particularly when you already have a job. But the number one leg of the foundation is mindset. And my brother's a believer in the Stoic mindset, and he's read Viktor Frankl, and he developed a program based on mindset, game plan, and networks. But mindset is just I guess it's something that you either come up with or you were born with it, or I'm not sure how that comes about. When, what was the moment that you invoked your father's sort of values?
So I was lucky. I was raised in a house with a fairly benign sense of human nature and a belief that um, optimism and good things would happen. And we were the people that thought if you walked into a barn filled with pony defecation, there must be a pony somewhere in there. So that belief that that fundamental sense of optimism, the grasping of the light at the end of the tunnel, the resilience. The key athletic quality in some way is resilience. And it's what do you do? Quarterback's thrown 3 interceptions, the crowd is booing, the game's getting out of hand. Can he compartmentalize, adopt a quiet mind, and tune out extraneous input, and in critical moments elevate his level of performance to take a team to victory? And so it's the same challenge when you're struggling with addiction, which is, I believe, totally in your concept of mindset, because it's if you can see beyond the current circumstances and have a fundamental belief everything will be okay if you just spend time and energy working on the problem. And in March, I turned 16 years continuously sober.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And anyway, so I'm a big believer in mindset.
So I know, you're obviously, you speak a lot, and congratulations on your recent Lifetime Achievement Award, and you've had a huge impact on people's lives. But in all the things you've done, and we talk about purpose and principle, what are you most proud of, Lee?
A program I set up with the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith to push back on skinheads and racists. So we trained people in the 30 biggest cities across the country how to fight against skinheads and hate groups, how to help police departments, how to go into crisis situation, intervene, and how to go into school systems and promote a sense of appreciation for ethnic differences. And I funded it for about 10 years, and we trained thousands of people in the fight against hate. The thing I'm most proud of is the athletic programs. It's so Ward Dunn, the retired running back, just put the 220th single mothers and their families into the first home they'll ever own by making the down payment and moving them in. Patrick Mahomes has 15 in the Mahomies, where he is able to help at-risk kids in hospitals, kids who are hungry. So the charitable foundations encompassing the biggest business powers in the city, the greatest political figures, and the greatest community leaders on a board is what I'm most proud of. Warren Moon with his Crescent Moon Foundation, who sent hundreds of kids to school. And then it's messaging. So you take a problem like domestic violence, and we were able to get Lennox Lewis to cut a public service announcement that said, "Real men don't hit women." And that could do more to trigger imitative change in rebellious adolescents than 1,000 authority figures could. So whether it's bullying or racism or climate change or sex trafficking or any of these problems, we can use athletes to do. And in aggregate, they raise I think the number's over $1.3 billion right now for good causes.
Well, from everything I've read, um, that was always a big part of your purpose, really. Even, in your heyday as a sports agent, when you owned the industry and you signed $3 billion in contracts and all of that, it seems clear from everything I read that it was as important as, making these people rich was impressing upon them the importance of helping other people, which you're obviously doing, and you've been successful. And these athletes you talk about and what they're doing for other people and their own foundations, I mean, that is just a remarkable achievement. I think it's hard to put a finger on it, but it's an achievement in itself, just to make people think about others, because that's not really in vogue these days. So,
We have self-absorption, right? Enough about me. Can we talk about how you feel about me?
yeah.
Self-absorption. And, but here's the point. I used to profile players from a college campus, and I would only take those clients who were willing to set up charitable and community programs, high school scholarship funds, collegiate repayments, foundations at the pro level, and who understood the fleeting and transient period that pro sports would play for them and the need to be focused on second career. And then I had a crisis of conscience back in the 80s because I'm representing half the starting quarterbacks, and they keep getting hit in the head. And we go to doctors and ask how many is too many, what's the magic number? They had no answers. And so we started in 1994 with concussion conferences, which I've now done 30 of. We did 2 hours at my last Super Bowl party, and bringing awareness, prevention, and cure to the issue. And the foundation is trying to bring consciousness awareness about the risks and dangers, and then find if there's a breakthrough where you could actually take a concussed brain and, through the theory of neuroplasticity, rewire it. And so the thought has always been, once severely injured, the brain just, it gets worse, never better. But now we have things like RTMS and neurofeedback that can actually change a brain to the positive.
Lee, on our show we have a friend, and he played in the NFL. His name's Anthony Pryor. Have you ever heard of that name?
Yes.
He ran a 4.2140, so I'm still friends with him, and he trains kids for speed now. But he also, on the side, has been putting together this little project that he wants me to help him with. And he single-handedly did a documentary project by himself about concussions. And he sent it to me, and I was blown away because he had the video of every concussion that he had had. I don't know how he got all the video from the time he was in high school all the way through the NFL. And it blew me away. Now, I knew a lot of stuff about the concussion stuff with the NFL. I didn't know what you were doing, but the fact that I asked him, hey, are you worried about CT? And he was 100%. And then we also had a guy named Carlos Bradley, that's Rob's friend, in the same role. He played in the NFL with concussion stuff too. Rob, what was Carlos doing?
I wrote this book with 2 doctors
Okay.
on concussion, the hidden trauma in contact sports in the NFL.
Yeah.
And I speak on those issues all across the country. But like I said, we've held 30 concussion conferences, and my charitable foundation has 14 doctors on an advisory board, and then players like Earl Campbell and Bruce Smith and Warren Moon, and a whole series of athletes who are on the advisory board. So I'm active every day in fighting the specter of athletic concussion.
Just out of curiosity, I don't think I saw Earl Campbell on your list. Was he a client of yours also?
After his career ended, we became very close, and he got an honor at one of my Super Bowl parties. We give out awards to an owner, a coach, a general manager, a current player, retired player, for the philanthropic things they've done in the world, and highlight the impact that they're making, because it doesn't make news, but any aberrational behavior obviously makes news. And to the extent that people think that's representative of the life that most athletes have, it's not. They're much more involved in being good husbands and parents, and involved with community and charity, and so we highlight that.
Lee, I reading about you doesn't do it. I am really, really impressed. If you'd never even been a sports agent, you'd still be kind of a Hall of Fame human being with your. It's philanthropic, but philanthropy, and I know you've certainly put your money where your mouth is, but your kind of philanthropy or generosity is kind of inspiring other people to do the same. And I think that's way more important than just writing a check. So I think being someone that promotes a generosity of spirit or philanthropy or foundations, whatever it is eons more important than just, giving them some money and saying good luck. I think.
Well, we agree on that, and if this new book is about inspiring people struggling with life things, I'm hoping to make a little difference and show them a path. My dad had another corollary he used to talk about. When you're looking for someone to make a change, to solve a problem, as small as picking a piece of paper off the floor, and as large as fighting racism or pushing back on climate change, the tendency is to wait for the amorphous they or them to solve the problem. Older people, political figures, business people. And he'd say, if you wait for them to solve the problem, you could wait forever. The they, son, is you. You are the they. So if you have that type of guidance, then that's what you see as your life's mission. Somebody would have negotiated money into players' contracts. They could have done it themselves at the end of the day and still been compensated. But am I stimulating the best values in young athletes? Are we preparing them for a second career? Are we making a difference in their lives? And together, are we making a difference in the larger context of the society?
One of the things that we started this whole program on back in 2021, based on really a mentor of mine, Coach Dale Brown, who coached at LSU, was we wanted to use this forum to positively impact youth. And one of the main thing that came out of it was mentorship. And you're being a mentor, and younger people model behavior of people they learn from. And so I think it's fantastic that you model that behavior to, professional athletes who, life's pretty good for a while. But what is your thoughts on mentorship?
You are a mentor.
I had mentors. I started with a family who were mentors. I believe it's our obligation to pass on values and skills to the next generation. We do the Agent Academy, but basically almost every day there's some young person who wants to be involved in the sports industry, whether it's working for a team, a league, a conference. And I make sure to spend 45 minutes with some young person every day if I can, and try to stimulate them to see sports as a powerful way to make a difference in the world, and trying to focus them on values, how how can they distinguish themselves from everyone else? How can they become a center of wisdom and advice themselves? And so there's the concept of planting seeds for your future self. And every time I meet with a young college student, law school, business school person, hopefully you have an impact on guiding them towards something that will ultimately be more fulfilling than just worrying about money.
You know, this is going way out on a ledge, but I have a 23-year-old who's working his first job out of college. He's working kind of in analytics for an insurance company and doing like payroll analytics. This doesn't sound real exciting, but he likes it and he likes what he's doing, but he's a very astute sports fan. Probably the best football acumen of anyone I know. At the risk of imposing, I may ask him if he would be interested in contacting you just for, he may be in that profile of youngster who could be inspired to do something important.
That's fine. Just call McKenna.
I will do that. And I appreciate that. But mentorship, as Greg said, is, I would say that almost sums up your career. Because even when you were a sports agent, you were a mentor. And tell me, yeah,
also,
sorry, Lee.
Yeah. Well, I've taught sports agency, marketing, law at Chapman University, at UC Irvine School of Law, at Concordia University. Those were each semesters, but I've spoken on 80 campuses, and I just got done with doing Michigan and Penn State and Arizona State and Cal and Grand Canyon and a variety of other schools, and I'll go back in the fall and do another group.
Now, do you do all those in person or online? You showing up at all those schools?
I've heard you can use an avatar, but no, I go in person.
Wow.
I go in person. So I'm hopefully, you know, if there are a couple hundred kids there, some of them you can make an impact on.
Oh, I have no doubt. Lee, tell me a little bit about your father.
My dad, my grandfather was a restaurateur, and he ended up his career at Hillcrest Country Club, managing it in Los Angeles. So I grew up on the laps of Groucho Marx and George Burns and George Jessel and Danny Kaye and a series of older comedians that my grandpa used to play every day. So the plan, and I have a picture of me sitting on the lap of Marilyn Monroe, and I have an Elvis Presley autographed guitar. But my father didn't want to go on in the restaurant business. He wanted to help kids. So he was a teacher, a vice principal, a principal, and his great passion was the Los Angeles City Human Relations Commission. So that, and that was made up of people from all over the city of Los Angeles, from every different ethnic group, so they could solve problems. And he was president of that a number of times. And so I watched my father make a difference. And, you know, he was just a font of common sense, and wrote articles for the LA Times, spoke a lot of places, and it was too soon to lose him at age 80 to esophageal cancer back in 2004. But, there comes a point in life where the children become the parents and the parents become the children. And it's unsettling, to say the least.
I'm dealing with that right now, like my dad. But, I want to go off to another question. I got two for you, okay? One thing we said earlier, but let's start with the first one. Let's talk about courage, because I've been in depression, the deepest bowels of depression, suicidal, and whether it's you running your career and starting these programs, and you have to have some courage. Whether you're doing great and you're taking on some other things that other people won't, or whether you're trying to, get through your, alcoholism. But I see a lack of leadership in a lot of areas, a lack of courage, and I want to know what your thoughts are on courage, plus how to implement that with young people, to have the courage to take risks, to challenge things. I feel like we've gotten away from that a little bit of modeling that. Now I know a lot of people do, but obviously it took a lot of courage to do your profession, which I'm sure is super competitive, but also go through your trials here. So courage, the first one. Second, I want to go back to youth sports because I'm heavily involved. I played my whole life. My idol's John Wooden. We're talking about lessons, John Stockton. And I'm seeing a lot of that stuff not happening. And it's become this money, egotistical, hungry thing at the lowest level where kids are either quitting or they're getting passed on, but they're not having a lot of fun. That's just my perspective. You tell me what you think.
Well, it's funny, I have the John Wooden pyramid back there.
Oh, okay.
So he was, my father had played freshman basketball at UCLA and was a fanatic basketball, never missed a game from 1947 to 2004, a home game. And I think it's really important to share your stories. And what I tried to do in the book was show that you could be Patrick Mahomes or Troy Aikman or Steve Young or anyone, and you're going to hit points where courage and tenacity and resilience are absolutely necessary. And so I think if those of us who are a little older share our stories and are willing to be transparent about life's challenges, then we can demonstrate courage. One of my next projects is that I'm thinking about is writing a book on parenting youth athletes, because no one gives you a driver's license when your son or daughter turns 5 and goes off to play soccer. Are they supposed to win at all costs? And is victory the key, or is participation the key? And if they're not starting, if they're playing a bad position, if the team's not winning, if they don't like the coach, do you counsel them to stand up for themselves and assert themselves, or should they suck it up and learn that life requires patience? And so I think that a book that talks about those different values, that deals with the overbearing parent, right, that deals with the single mother who didn't have a sports background, might be interesting.
I think that's a fantastic idea.
What I'm seeing where I'm at, right? So John Wooden is my idol. So I'm seeing at the youngest level, it's going too fast. We're going through the process. There's not teaching going on. It's not fun. And what makes it fun after the initial fun is you got to learn skills, get a little confidence, take risks. We have a lot of coaches at the lowest level, but we don't have a lot of teachers. And we push, I'll take basketball. I don't know if there's any skill, making toast, tying your shoe, driving a car, that you can learn those skills so fast and go right and use them. So little guys that practice twice a week, but go play 5 games on the weekend, you're only taking the best athlete. They don't know how to play sports yet. They're just competing, but the philosophy is we're going to win. That's why you're on our team, but we're not going to teach. So that alienates a lot of people right away, and it's the biggest problem why kids are quitting, because they don't feel confident. They're not having fun. But there's a lot of money on the other side. So I see parent problems. I see referee problems. I see coaches. And to me, the biggest thing I read in your book, too, is like Where is the accountability? I've been in gyms where I've seen parents fight at a second grade game, and they're watching next week, and it's like, where's the accountability? There's so much money on the front and the back end, but who's teaching those lessons and teaching those values?
Well, that would be the point of the book. Now, my inspiration was my daughter Katie was about 10, and they got into the soccer playoffs, and they lost, and she's out on the field crying. So I run up to her like any empathetic father to tell, there'll be more seasons, Katie, there'll be time, you know. She looks at me and she says, Dad, I'm not crying because we lost. I'm crying because I don't get to see my girlfriends on the team as much anymore. And you realize how different our perspective is from the kids playing Little League who just lost the game, but what they really care about is the treat and the ice cream that we're going to get after the game. And you mentioned taking the fun out of it. So that's where you need the right mindset. I mean, sports teaches self-discipline. It teaches postponement of current gratification for future success. It teaches teamwork. It teaches and camaraderie. It teaches courage under pressure. So it's got a lot of life skill. It takes, as you mentioned before, taking a complex series of information like a playbook and being able to utilize it in real time. So it teaches great values, but you can take all the fun out of it and kids quit.
So my pet peeve, among others, in youth sports in particular, is in the coaching. And my milieu was more baseball than anything. I coached a lot of youth baseball, coached high school baseball, played college baseball, but you know, the Little League coaches, for the most part, believed they were the most important guys on the field. And high school coaches believe they're the most important guys on the, not everybody, obviously, but so many coaches in all sports forget that they're coaches and they're teachers, particularly youth coaches. You're a teacher, you're a mentor, you're a caring individual. And if that is not your top priority, if the well-being and the happiness and the education and the enjoyment of your players is not utmost in your mind, you're not in the right place. And when you're done with the parents' book, would you mind writing a youth coach book?
We'll put the coaches into the youth parenting book.
Yeah, that'd be good.
What their proper motivation. Again, all of us have to realize when you have children or young people playing sports that it's about their experience. It's not about us. It's about their quality of experience. It's not that it embarrasses you because this other father on the other side's son or daughter is doing better, right? It's not a reflection when your kid falls over instead of, or drops a pass or does whatever. It doesn't reflect on us as parents.
I mean, that was a short book, but it was a good chapter right there. That sums it all up, really. If, so many of these coaches feel like they're responsible. Number one, they feel winning and losing is so important. This for 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds. Number two, they believe they control it. Like I've watched so many baseball games, the coach has zero to do with the outcome. He fills out a lineup card. Second inning, you bring in new guys, you do blah, blah, blah. But a ball that's a foot fair is a triple. Foot foul, it's a strike. And I just could not figure out how to let these guys know that they're just caregivers at that point. They're taking care of these young kids to make sure that they love playing. and that they keep playing instead of killing it. I think a lot of coaches, with their overzealous approach, kill the love of the sport for these kids. And I think it's a crime. But that said, they're the ones that raised their hand and volunteered to coach. So, I can see both
It's a little
sides
complex.
of it. Yeah. I mean, Greg and I have talked about the possibility of certifying youth coaches somehow. And in doing so, kind of looking at them the way you looked at your college players, to gauge their empathy. Do they give a crap about the kids they're coaching, or is it all about them? And I guess, the fact that that was a priority in identifying young people who might be suitable clients was a tremendous thing on your part. Empathy, where is it?
Empathy. My daughter came home from school one day, and she had a number written on her arm. And I said, Katie, what are you doing with with writing on your arm? And she said, well, there's this kid in our class that doesn't have many friends, and I know it's about to be his birthday, so I wanted to remember to wish him a happy birthday. And I said, we did something right in parenting because she's got empathy.
Yeah.
She can put herself in the other person's heart and mind and experience the world they see it. Can tune into the deepest anxieties and fears and greatest hopes and dreams of another person. She's got the listening skills, which I think is the most important skill in life.
Huge skill, absolutely. Yeah. How old is Katie?
At that point, she was in high school, 13 maybe, but she got it. And I thought, I really could care less whether she masters math or Spanish or the rest of it. She can learn that out of a book. But what she learned by going to school was empathy.
Well, she learned it by watching Daddy also. I mean, there's nothing wrong with admitting that, and you learned it watching your daddy, and that's how it goes if we're lucky.
If we're lucky. Hey, Lee, I had a question regarding your sports career now. How much has it changed from 15 years ago till now? I mean, let's say you're going after, talking to kids in high school.
Everything has
Everything.
changed. First of all, you have NIL. So when I told you I wanted to talk to a mature young person, that athlete who I used to talk to at 21 is now hiring a marketing agent at 17.
Yeah.
And that marketing agent is negotiating with the university for how big the NIL package will be. They don't have to have any qualifications. To be a sports agent, you need to get certified by a union, you need to pay money, take a test, undergo a background screening, follow these rules that they have. But to be a marketing agent, nothing. So that's a big change. The second, conference realignment at the college level, huge change. The advent of the internet and the various platforms of social media is a massive change. That information flows not over TV and newspapers like it did in our youth, but over the internet. And it's how many followers do you have on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, and that sets up a change. And then you have gambling, which is supposed to be a impregnable wall between sports and gambling. And it's the existential threat, because all it's going to take is another player to communicate with a gambler, fix or shade their performance, or give them inside information. and then all of a sudden, are the games played on an even playing field, or is it wrestling?
Yeah.
I don't know how you deal with
Seems like
It's complicated.
a much tougher landscape now than it had been. And I think the pervasiveness of the gambling is damaging society as a whole. I mean, I don't know the facts, but I'm sure people are going broke left and right.
Rob, there's a whole generation of young people whose whole relationship with sports now is gambling. And when you put together advertisements that show the good life for DraftKings and MGM and all the rest of it, and you show those in a ubiquitous way over and over and over again during football games, it's gonna addict a whole set of gamblers, and we're modeling self-destructive behavior.
I was watching, I don't know if it was 60 Minutes or some program like that, and it was probably a year ago, and they were talking about this issue with college males. And these guys were getting together, parties, some guys were putting up their parents' homes, they were betting on every, play. And there was 4 or 5 of these guys, and they all went broke. They lost everything.
Because of prop bets, you can literally bet on 100 different things. Which team will win the coin flip, which team will win field position, how many yards will the first kick return be, and on and on and on. And you bet over under, and it's intoxicating.
It's another addiction. I mean, it's
It
an
is.
addiction.
Gambling
It
addiction.
So, how much of this new, I don't even know what to call it, but how much of these afflictions are incorporated into your speeches to young people and college audiences and athletes?
I explain to them what a brave new world it is and what the dangers, can be. And in the same way where my story might help somebody with alcoholism, talking about gambling as an addiction and the fact that what happens in the human brain is it rests in the same addictive area as drugs or alcohol or sex or all of those obsessions. And if you lose money, then the human brain tells you got to win it back. And then you get deeper in the hole. And again, the brain's telling these young kids, you got to get it back. And now when you owed $100, now it's $1,000, now it's $5,000. And it just goes on and on.
Yeah. The best thing that might have ever happened to me was in college. I had 2 instances where I started betting. One was basketball, and I won 10 bets in a row, like $10 bets. I said, this is easy. So I upped my bets, and I lost all of them, and I made one final bet, like classic mistake, to get it all back, and I actually won it. And I remember I was at a study session at BU, and I asked everybody, can we, you mind if we put the Celtics game on? And they were playing the Suns, and I don't even remember who won, but I survived. And that was the last bet I ever made on basketball. And I did the same thing when the Yanks played the Reds. I bet the Yankees to win the first game. They lost. Doubled up the second. They lost. Doubled up the third. They lost. Doubled up on the Reds the fourth game and went to the game, and my heart was almost beating out of my shirt. And the Reds won, and I survived it, and that was the last bet I ever made. But it is so easy to get in deep, deep trouble that I'm sure people don't understand, as I didn't. And that was a blessing for me. But man, it's a terrible, terrible thing we're encouraging all these young people to do.
Guys, I have another appointment in 10 minutes, so
Let me ask you a question about this. So I grew up in a family where there's a lot of alcoholism, drug addiction. I was lucky. I think sports saved my life. I got lucky. I had mentors like John Stockton early, and these positive, insightful people. But now here I'm older, and I have some in-laws. I mentioned to you maybe, or maybe it was Amy, I don't know, but that is in the thralls of alcoholism, who has extreme challenges, losing family, who is extremely an educated, smart, analytical person, who is stubborn, who will not make the change, will not do what he needs to do. What would be your advice to somebody like that, that is just that part of your brain you said you can't change, that just cannot get out of that spinning cycle?
to do the necessary work to recover, people have to hit their own personal bottom. They have to arrive at a point, and you hit a lower point, then a lower point, then a lower point. Things get more and more outrageous. But you have to hit a point at which you realize that addiction, alcohol, your relationship is unmanageable, and your life has become unmanageable, and you're powerless over alcohol. And you've got to hit that point. It's really frustrating for the people around the suffering person, because they feel like they can do so. Well, they could do an intervention and get the person off to rehab, but breaking denial is the hardest thing. I mean, remember, for a number of years I wasn't drinking during the day. I was drinking late at night, and we were very productive. And so you have the whole world telling you you're the best in your field. You had 64 first rounders, and 8 of them were the first player in the pick in football, and 12 players in Hall of Fame, and 30 first round baseball players, and blah, 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 blah. How can you...
Yeah, don't change a thing.
Right. So the point is, you have to hit an ultimate bottom. And when you do that, it will motivate the person to do the 12 steps and the hard work to do it. And, you know, you feel so frustrated if you're a third party, because you want to say to that person, why, in the face of financial, relationship, reputation, reverses, would you continue to do this? And the answer the person will give you is, I don't know, because their brain's been rewired so that the cravings are so strong. I used to sit in front of my condo late at night, and I'd say, you know, tonight I'm not going to drink. And magically my car drove itself to the liquor store, and it came back with a big bottle. So you've got to break that. And the good thing about addiction is eventually the cravings calm down, and eventually you're not thinking about the subject all the time. And that day's glorious, because at that point, as long as you keep your routine, you'll make it to the other side.
One last question about this, because it's so pertinent. In your case, did you actually hit rock bottom, or did you hear your dad's voice before you hit rock bottom?
No, I hit rock bottom. My father had died. Had he lived, I don't think the result would have been the same, because he was such a strong influence. But he had died in 2004, and I ultimately crashed in 2010, and went, as I told you, went into sober living. But I had to, you know, I'm sitting at the park where I grew up as a child, and I'm drinking vodka out of a paper bag. And I was so far away from the fundamental values and priorities that had guided my life, and so I just listened to every older person who had conquered alcoholism, and I felt like I was going back to college, and I just studied everything they did. I was so much, quote, the expert in life, and here I was completely ignorant on the subject, and I needed help.
Well, congratulations, Lee, on
Yeah.
you
Wow.
coming back and all your adversity. I admire your philanthropic work, your resilience, everything you're doing. I mean, it's been great. I love how you talk about mentorship, but we've had some tough, challenging topics here. Let's end on a good positive note from Leigh Steinberg. What do you got to say to everybody?
Um, that that if you're kind to your future self, if you plant those seeds that may not come to immediate fruition, but will build relationships for life, if you can think your way into being happier. When you think negative thoughts, it releases cortisol and epinephrine and all these bad brain chemicals. Just smiling or just forcing yourself to think positive thoughts lets go dopamine and serotonin and a whole set of positives. So life's wonderful. We're lucky we live in the United States, a free country with a high standard of living, and it's a blessing to be here. So let's all go make a positive difference in the world.
Perfect.
I've been so lucky, Lee, that I've worked for most of my career with people who live with disabilities. And by and large, and some, I mean quadriplegics, quadra amputees, almost to a person, they've told me life is good. So I've been buffered from, self-pity just by rule. It's against the rule of nature for me to feel sorry for myself, and I haven't. And I've tried to figure out how to make people who have everything to be grateful for be grateful. I haven't done it yet. I haven't figured it out yet, but I think speaking with you has helped. Certainly, you've helped so many people, and speaking with you, I can see why your phone's ringing, why people want you to come talk, why people have been so moved by you, and I'm absolutely grateful for the time you've spent with us today.
Thank you for those kind words.
Thank you.
All right, Lee. Well, you have a great day, and thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm anxious to see what you do next.
So am I.
Take care.
Thanks so much, Lee.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.